look after its activities in circular economy and resource efficiency. Let's begin this session on circular economy and COVID by asking a question. Is there a chance that the COVID pandemic has humbled humankind by showing the ability of a natural and invisible particle to shock the global economy? COVID-19 has the potential to destroy individual livelihoods, businesses, industries, and entire economies. Has it, or will it make humans recalibrate their sense of invincibility or complacency? Clearly, all the systems that we had built, whether they were political, social, economic systems, or health systems, did not support us when the pandemic finally blew. It buckled in all countries on all continents. No one had prepared for a simultaneous health and economic crisis. The system was not built to survive unplanned stresses or what we simply call risks. If you build a structure along the same systems principles as that of a circular economy, though, you would have built one that is resilient because it involves a large number of people along the entire value chain. In other words, it is diverse and offers the same benefits of buffering and resilience that biodiversity confers on ecosystems. The ITC Center for Sustainable Development at CII works in the areas of circular economy and resource efficiency. Over the past 2 years, the center has been expanding its footprint on circular economy through knowledge products and studies in different sectors of the Indian economy. In 2018, we brought out a CEO guide on circular economy and competitiveness, and we recently completed a study on resource efficiency in the pulp and paper and iron and steel sectors. On the issue of plastics, we brought out 2 reports, one called the Unplastic Strategy, and the other, a circular economy strategy for India for plastics. The recommendations in this latter report are particularly relevant during this COVID crisis, promoting 2 attractive opportunities, which we recommend. The first is the innovative reuse business models for plastics packaging, particularly, and number 2, collecting, sorting, and recycling infrastructure. Currently, we're working on an economy-wide inventory and material flow for the 6 plastic resins, as also on a study of the interlinkages between resource efficiency and climate change via studies in India's heavy industries. We're especially interested at the center in generating the data and scientific evidence for businesses and policymakers to use. So, speaking of science-based evidence and solutions, it's a good point to refer to Professor Bakshi, who in his research at Ohio State University developed systematic methods to ensure that engineering solutions make positive contributions to sustainable development without causing unintended harm. He will talk to us about the concepts of sustainability, resilience, and respecting ecological limits, and how ignoring all these could lead to crises similar to the one we are struggling with at present. Earlier this year, during the lockdown, sometime in April, opinion polls across many countries showed that people had noticed clean air, clean water, uncongested roads, the return of bird song and wildlife, and that people are asking whether normal was good enough. Could we not build back better? Yes, we can. Well, the European Union certainly has resolved to. Mr. Getor Dufu is on our panel and in charge of bilateral and regional cooperation on environmental matters in the Directorate General for Environment of the European Commission. He is well placed to tell us about the main elements of EU's Green Deal and its Circular Economy Action Plan. As the person in charge of environmental cooperation with India, he will speak to us about prospects for increased EU-India cooperation on resource efficiency and circular economy, especially in the post-COVID world. Welcome. Back home in India, the EU's Resource Efficiency Initiative works through a consortium led by GIZ, and of which CII, TERI, and Adelphi are members. A tremendous amount of work has been accomplished through this initiative in the last 3 years in India, setting the context, framing strategies, and carrying out a lot of studies on a variety of important materials, including plastic and electronic waste, for example. Dr. Rachna Arora is the deputy team leader of this initiative at GIZ, and she has navigated this challenging path in India and is on our panel to tell us all about her experience and the initiative. Circular economy is not an abstract concept for theoreticians. Mr. Freek van Eyck, Managing Director of Holland's Circular Hotspot, will walk us through the Netherlands' journey to circularity, which is an ambitious, bold, visionary, but extremely practical journey. Thank you so much, Freek, for accepting our invitation to be with us here today. We all know the basic tenets of a circular economy revolve around retaining the value of material resources such as metal, rubber, wood, plastic through a product's life cycle. Captain Mohan Ram on the panel represents the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, with whom he's been working tirelessly to develop a viable system for automobile recycling in India. Welcome, Captain Mohan Ram, and we look forward to gaining from your rich experience, especially as the policy push towards e-vehicles gathers momentum. This is a great slew of speakers. Let's track back to Professor Bakshi now and hear from you. Professor Bakshi, please.
So thank you very much, Nandini, for this nice introduction. And thank you to CII for inviting me and to all the participants in this really interesting and very important and relevant session that we have. So Nandini, if you can share my slides on your screen, please.
We'll start that in a moment.
Okay. Okay, so basically, to get started, what I'm going to be talking about is if we want to achieve this goal to build back better, basically recover from COVID-19, what we need are sustainability, resilience, and respect for nature. These are the bare minimum things that, in my opinion, we need. And what I will do in the next 7 minutes or so is give you an idea of what is the reasoning behind this and a glimpse of some of the issues and challenges and opportunities that we need to address. So I'm at the Ohio State University in the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering. And if you look for me online, you can find information about our background and the work we do, etc. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I think if you, okay. So I think for a full screen, if you do F5, I think that should, or F11 should work. Or Control L, this is Adobe, right? So Control L should work. Anyway, so, basically to build back better from COVID-19, I want to primarily make 2 points. The first point is that pursuit of profitability can make supply chains fragile. And I don't think I need to convince anybody of that today, given the fact that global supply chains have essentially collapsed across the world, in many industries. And that has proven to us that resilience of our supply chains is not something that we can claim in almost all cases. So the focus tends to be on enhancing efficiency and making our systems more profitable. And it is well known that there is a trade-off between efficiency and robustness. And if you try to become too efficient, you can make your system brittle and it can fail in the presence of a disturbance. And COVID-19 is certainly one of those things. Circular networks, if we can develop them properly, can balance profitability with fragility. This is something that Nandini also mentioned in her introduction, and there is work that is demonstrating these characteristics. But developing such networks, these circular networks that are actually robust and efficient and profitable, it's not just a matter of doing more recycling. Many times people think of circular economy as, oh, I just need to do more recycling. But it's not as simple as that, as I will demonstrate in a little bit later on. It requires systems thinking and innovation. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, the second point I want to make is that to build back better from COVID-19, we must address the root cause of this pandemic, which is ecological degradation. The fact is that ecosystems play a critical role in sustaining all human activities, and it has been estimated to be providing services that are worth trillions of dollars. However, the value that we put or give to ecosystems in conventional economic kind of analysis is close to zero. So this disparity is one of the reasons why ecosystems have been degrading all over the world and is one of the root causes of this pandemic. So what we need are ways to make decisions while explicitly accounting for the role of ecological systems as well as their carrying capacity, which is something that virtually no discipline today is able to do. So let me get into a little bit more details about both of these points. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So I'm going to show you some preliminary results that we have from a study that we are doing, where we are looking at, how does one develop a circular economy for grocery sacks. So these are just the usual. So we're looking at plastic sacks. At least those are the results I'm going to show you, and a variety of plastic sacks. If we want to achieve highest circularity, then the figure that you see on your screen is what is the solution with the existing options that are available for grocery sacks in the United States. But I think this would apply to most parts of the world, including India. So the best solution here turns out to be using polylactic acid, PLA plastic bags. PLA, as you may know, is biodegradable. It can be made from biomass, and it is relatively easy to recover and recycle. And if you don't recover it and recycle it, it can also be composted. However, the disadvantage of PLA is that it can give you high circularity, but it is also the most expensive solution, and it also has a high carbon footprint. On the other hand, if you can go to the next slide, please. If we want the lowest cost solution, then the solution is to use single-use polyethylene bags. These are the common bags that we have been using for a long time and are a root cause of a lot of the littering and the plastics-related problems. And from the cost point of view, the best thing to do with these polyethylene bags is to litter them. Don't recycle them, don't put them in the trash, throw them on the street. That is the most cost-effective solution. So this solution has very low circularity, close to zero, but it is the cheapest solution and it has the smallest carbon footprint. So, obviously this is a ridiculous solution. Nobody would want to do this. Between these two extremes, there are thousands of other solutions that are available. So what we need to do, if you can go to the next slide, is to develop systematic methods and tools that can evaluate these thousands of alternatives and choose the ones that are most resilient and sustainable circular systems. Obviously, this also requires lots of innovation, new ways of doing chemical recycling, new types of materials, new types of human behavior and societal types of changes. So there are a lot of these sorts of challenges that do need to be taken into account if we are truly to develop a circular economy that is both sustainable and resilient. If you can go to the next slide. The second point that I mentioned was that we need to learn from and respect nature. And as I mentioned earlier, all disciplines for at least the last 300 years have been ignoring the role of ecological systems. Engineering implicitly assumes that sources and sinks are infinite. We can get whatever we want from nature and we can dump whatever we want into nature. It is infinite, it can handle it. economics pretty much makes the same assumption through the concept of what are called public goods. Economics considers nature to be free, low cost, unlimited, and substitutable. If you run out of water, I'm not sure what we can find as a substitute for that, but that's the assumption that economics has traditionally been making. And ecological degradation is a root cause of these zoonotic diseases like COVID-19, but also lots of other environmental problems, including climate change, air pollution, water scarcities, etc. So if you can go to the next slide. One more. Um, okay, so basically, what we need to do is to do integrated design of technology-based solutions and nature-based solutions. And through the work that we are doing and many other people across the world have been doing, is if we explicitly account for the role of ecosystems in our designs, then we can find solutions that can be cheaper, so economically superior, and also environmentally superior. And this figure that I have, this photograph that I have on the slide, is that of a biodiesel manufacturing facility. And what we have been doing is we have been designing this manufacturing facility, but not as a plant that is standalone, but along with the forest in the green region that provides air quality regulation ecosystem service, and a treatment wetland in the blue region that provides water quality regulation ecosystem service. And we have shown that if we were to do this type of an integrated design, we can find ways of operating this biodiesel manufacturing process in a manner that is less expensive and has a lower environmental impact. And there are lots of studies of this type that are very promising, and this is another promising area of research that could explicitly account for the role of ecosystems in supporting human and engineering activities. So let me finish up by going to one last slide here. If you can go to the next slide. Is, will this next pandemic, and there is going to be one, it seems, at the current rate, there will be one. Is it going to originate in India? If you go to the next two slides, basically, if you look at, this is a map from satellite image of Delhi in 1989 and 2018, and you can see there is a huge amount of ecological degradation and destruction that has happened in the outskirts of Delhi because of the expansion, urban growth. And this is the way that we have been coming very close to biodiversity and biodiversity losses, and is a contributor to zoonotic diseases and so on. If you can, last slide. So in India, we have a long heritage of respecting nature, which we seem to have forgotten. But if we rediscover that and learn from it and modernize it to the world that we live in today, then we can, I believe, lead the world toward sustainability. So those are some of the points that I wanted to make. Thank you for your attention.
That's chilling, Dr. Bakshi, really. Get on to you, please.
Thank you, Nandini. Thanks a lot for all the panelists and for the participants, and thanks especially for the organizer for the opportunity for me to intervene in this webinar and to share some perspective from the European Union on the topic. The global coronavirus pandemic has brought hardship throughout the world, in India, in Europe, and has bringing an almost halt to our way of life. While containing the virus, saving lives has been the natural focus of our immediate efforts. Climate change, biodiversity loss, excessive use of resources, pollution, also existential threats for our societies that keep threatening us, especially the most vulnerable in our society. Over the coming period, there will be trillions of euros that will be spent by different governments throughout the world for recovering from this crisis. These funds are basically borrowed from our younger generation and from the next one. And the COVID-19 recovery provides a chance for governments to show their ability to address these challenges in the long term by building more inclusive and resilient societies. The massive investment that will be needed to kickstart our economies must basically relieve the burden on this next generation shoulder, not make it heavier. And this is why the recovery plans that should be designed is an opportunity, as you were mentioning, Nandini, to build back better and invest in an economy of the 21st century and not in an obsolete one of the past one. On the Commission side, we have strongly reconfirmed that the post-COVID recovery would still be directed by the European Green Deal, which is basically the growth strategy of the European Union. I will just share some slides to support my talk. I hope you can see it. And this Green Deal strategy is the new strategy of the European Commission that was developed in December last year, so not a year ago, and it aims at transforming the EU into a more prosperous and fair society with a more resource efficient and competitive economy, where one of the strong objectives of it is that there is no net emission of greenhouse gas in 2050, and that economic growth is decoupled from resource use. It also aims to protect, conserve, and enhance the EU's natural capital, and to protect the health and the well-being of our citizens from the environmental-related risks and impact. There is an important element of it also, which is the importance for this transition to be just and inclusive and to put people first and leave no one behind. So this strategy was released in December 19, and it has been rolled out through a range of thematic action plans and strategy in the EU. In March, there was notably the publication of an ambitious biodiversity strategy and a farm-to-fork strategy looking at the food system. It will also notably include a chemical strategy for sustainability and a zero pollution action plan. And an important element is the comprehensiveness of this plan to also mainstream climate, environmental priorities within the whole range of EU policies and geographic strategies. There is a lot that can be done through the recovery, strong areas of action that can lead to big impacts, for example, in modifying the built environment, in renovating buildings, in the mobility through the electrification, the energy through the renewables and the clean hydrogen. But it's clear that the resource efficiency and the circular economy has a particular role to play in this building back better. And I want to go a bit more in detail in one of the components of this European Green Deal, which is the Circular Economy Action Plan, which and the different elements of it. So this is something that was proposed by the European Commission back in March this year, and it includes different components, this new Circular Economy Action Plan. The first one is around sustainable product policy making. The idea is to make sustainable products the norm in the EU. This will be done by proposing legislation on sustainable product policy, on ensuring that products that are placed on the EU market are designed to last longer, that they are easier to reuse, to repair, to recycle, and that they incorporate as much as visible recycled material instead of primary raw materials. An important dimension is also the empowerment of consumers, because we want consumers to have access to information, reliable information on issues such as the repairability and durability of their products to help them make environmentally sustainable choices. We know that the circular economy transition will not happen without a strong push from the consumers, and it's important that they have access to reliable information. The Circular Economy Action Plan focuses on some resource-intense sector where we know that there is a lot of potential for more circularity. This includes, and it will expand to a range of concrete actions on different sectors, including ICT, plastics, textile, construction, building. We also have, as part of this plan, an objective to halve municipal waste by 2030, including new targets to reduce packaging waste, to include mandatory requirements for all packaging being placed on the EU markets, and to have the objective to make all packaging placed on the EU market reusable or recyclable in an economically viable way by 2030. So there is also some elements around actions to minimize EU exports of waste elsewhere in the world and to tackle illegal shipment of waste. Finally, an important dimension is the international dimension of this action plan, with a number of initiatives looking at launching a global circular economy alliance, notably. This quite ambitious action plan and the Green Deal are, of course, global, and the drivers for climate change, biodiversity are global, and the EU is willing to use its experience and its expertise to work jointly with partners throughout the world for a more sustainable economic development path. This is notably the case with India. We know that India is also designing a quite significant economic stimulus package, and the inclusion of resource efficiency elements in these strategies will be essential. We see that the post-COVID-19 recovery as an opportunity to accelerate this transition. India economic growth and the aspiration of its growing middle class cannot be sustained without the current linear economic model that is exhausting resources, degrading environment, creating biodiversity loss and pollution. And this agenda of resource efficiency, circular economy can contribute to various Indian priorities on job creation, poverty alleviation, economic self-reliance, pollution reduction, climate change mitigation, and the sustainability of the natural resources that form the base of India's potential economic growth. We have notably had exchanges and cooperation on this topic between EU and India in the context of the resource efficiency, and I know that Dr. Rachna will talk about it in more details after me. But this is a very important work that I think have been quite successful. Key sectors having been analyzed, and potential and assessment have been done in that regard. I would. There was also in this context a draft national policy that was released, and we hope it can be implemented fully. And on the European Commission side, there is strong willingness to support India in this endeavor, and to scale up our partnership by exchanging more knowledge, more expertise, and by bringing more business opportunities between EU and Indian firms, notably through a second phase of this resource efficiency initiative that will start soon. This willingness was recalled in the recent EU-India summit in July, where President Modi and EU President of Prime Minister Modi and President of the Commission and of the European Council adopted also a joint declaration on resource efficiency and circular economy, and this should form the basis of an upscaling of our discussion and exchanges and cooperation on the topic. So, really looking forward to engaging further with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gito. Thank you so much. Dr. Rachna Arora, the floor is yours. If you could please keep your presentation brief, we'd have time for questions, as I'm sure the participants have plenty. Thank you.
Thanks, Nandini. I will just have one slide. Is my screen visible?
It is.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think Gitan actually mentioned about the EU Resource Efficiency Initiative, and I think it flows very well in the agenda. Some of you would be aware that we started this project 3 years back, and this has been one of the, I would say, a pioneering initiatives to talk about putting resource efficiency and circular economy on the agenda for the government of India, and also just look at where, of course, Gitan just ended, that there is now a EU-India joint summit declaration, which is actually on resource efficiency and circular economy. So I think these 3 years have been really a lot of work together with our Indian partners, together with the EU delegation, and of course the government of India to strengthen, to prioritize, and put this topic, because I think this not only just looks at fostering sustainable use of resources, but also looks at implementation of the SDG agenda and other issues which were, of course, very, very prominent, I would say, before the pandemic. And now I think I would just present some of these key impacts, what we have, and also talk about a little bit of the implementation that we need to rethink now from yeah, I think the post pandemic, or how do we actually think about moving forward in this area. So I think in terms of our impacts in the last 3 years, we have actually been able to have now a draft resource efficiency policy, which is with the Ministry of Environment. Last year it was announced, and yeah, I think this is something which has been a request from the industry, from the other ministries, to actually have an overarching resource efficiency framework. And this was an extensive guided process wherein we had a lot of experts, uh, industry, and civil society looking at the need of having an overarching framework, because in India we have many, many regulations that talk about environment sustainability and resource efficiency, but not looking at the overall context, especially now with the circular economy perspective. You need to think about not just 3 Rs, which is in across different waste rules, but also just consider other perspectives, especially considering maybe 5 Rs or 6 Rs as a strategy. So this is where the resource efficiency policy is quite innovative, the way it was designed, and I think we're all looking forward to have a final version of this policy soon. Then something which was notably mentioned in the EU-India Joint Summit Declaration, signed in July this year, was a resource efficiency strategy that, together with the EU delegation and Niti Aayog, was released. And I think this was an impact, because a lot many times this remains in the Environment Ministry agenda, or it remains with one or two sectoral ministries. But Niti Aayog has been a key facilitator to actually get 9 other ministries, other departments on board, and also set up an action plan, which is I would say quite similar to the way the EU Circular Economy Action Plan or some of the member states, for instance, the German Progress looks at. And I think this is where the resource efficiency strategy is a pioneering effort by the government of India to actually not just cover resource efficiency, but also notably put circular economy on that front for the ministries and departments to come up with their own action plans. Then, of course, I think this was all that we tried to do at a national level, coming to the state level, because a lot of issues were to be dealt at a state level. And I think this is where we have actually had one of the first states of Goa to actually have its own state research efficiency strategy. Then, of course, I think together with the CII, 2 years back, we did a circular economy mission, which was again a quite, yeah, I would say, a large delegation of EU businesses and Indian businesses actually looking at the possible partnerships. And out of that, we've been able to materialize 3 or 4 partnerships and announcements which have gone forward. Also, some of them are not as in a partnership on technology exchange, but these are also soft skills, for instance, adaptation of EU standards. So there, of course, we were able to delve in a partnership which was key to actually take over the adaptation of the WEEE standards as such. I would just like to close this. Yeah. My screen share closed.
You can share it.
No, I think I'm done with the slides. I just wanted to make few points. I think also just to reiterate what Nandini was mentioning. And I think the pandemic has actually been one of the things which has been, we have actually faced it. And I think we've been faced more the way currently the numbers are also ranging. But I think what has been key is that before the pandemic, a lot of issue, a lot of discussion, and of course the monitoring efforts have been on GFG emission monitoring, control, and other issues, as well as energy efficiency. But and of course, the higher recycling rates towards being as more circular. But I think the last 7 months have been notably quite important to look at how we have transformed into a little sustainable lifestyle and a behavioral change. I also just hear Professor Bakshi when he mentioned about the use of polythene bags or the single-use plastics and others, which I think as a country we had gone into a completely no plastic or lesser plastic area. But now I think we have of course had a huge behavioral change, sustainable lifestyle, the way we are operating, the way we are living and working now is very, very different considering how we were in few years. And I think this is where we need to have further mechanisms being forward to actually take this into a right direction and not just negate to the announcements, to the follow-ups that were introduced. Then I think on the value chains, this is also something that has been quite a lot impacted. Some of them have been hugely impacted by the pandemic, but and also very recently, I think in the BRICS nation meeting held in July again this year, this issue of promoting circular economy was brought forward. And I think when next year India would host a BRICS meeting, this still remains as an issue which is to be taken forward, because I think they're looking at developing national plans for economic recovery, looking at challenges from poverty, inequality, and employment. Because these are the areas where we can actually think of mainstreaming resource efficiency further. And I think looking at the circular economy action plan from the EU, the rethinking system, process design, adaptability to the future pandemic is key. And I think predominantly considering that we were linear and now with the pandemic, we would have an approach of moving towards a higher resource extraction or regenerative economic activity, which is largely geared towards enhancing jobs and employment. But I think we need to put in elements and indicators which actually foster further sustainable approaches. Then I think consumer behavioral shift is what I already mentioned. Uh, I think just one more bit that I had to share was about remanufacturing. And I think we have seen over the last few months an entire need on some areas where there's an entire requirement to remanufacture products, ones especially on medical devices, where people have to think about alternatives because, of course, the technology, the production rates were pretty low. So I think refurbishment did appear as one of the elements of uh, moving both sustainably as well as looking at digitalization and other innovative thinking that needs to bring to be brought on board. And yeah, I think as I already mentioned, the resource efficiency policy is still awaited. We need to see how do we actually look at the local supply chain, the disruption there, and of course looking at improving the localized material sourcing as much as possible. Also heard the minister today, Mr. Javadekar, where in his speech he already mentioned about a self-reliant India, like towards creating the self-reliant India, we need to import less, innovate towards a better resource efficiency, and enhance industrial applied research. If I hear this, and if we also correlate the joint statement which was signed between EU and India, I think these two things actually foster for research and innovation, look towards areas of joint collaboration. And I think this is where we would have a much larger scope through the project, through the initiative, with the partners as a CII, TERI, and Adelphi to actually take forward a lot of these approaches forward and also design models, circular business models, which are more resilient to the future shocks. Yeah, thanks. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Rachna. Thanks a lot. Very exciting prospects, lots of hard work. Craig, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, India. Warm greetings from the Netherlands. My name is Freek van Eyck. I'm Director of Holland Circular Hotspot. And I will share with you the Dutch experience and motivation to embrace the circular economy, because I believe now that it's even more relevant than ever. Well, of course, where do we come from? COVID-19 has been a wake-up call for us. The world came to a stop, supply lines were broken, we ended up in a lockdown, there were unprecedented economic support packages And well, the way it looks now is that our GDP will shrink 5% in the Netherlands, and our unemployment will double to 6.5%, which is actually relatively low. Now, most likely, let's say COVID-19 will be followed by a recession in many, many places. But further in the future, we can expect far more drastic impacts related to climate change, potential resource conflicts, environmental degradation, massive migration probably. So actually now is the time to act, because the cost of not acting will be much higher. And this really has been, I think, a wake-up call. It's the time to build back better. Now, we are lucky to live in a continent with the ambitions of the EU Green Deal, which is, let's say, very inspirational. But also in my own country, the Netherlands, there are many multinationals, NGOs, and scientists really have said that this is the time to embrace the circular economy, to make the economy more resilient, not to build back the old economy which was there. And also, institutional investors and consumers have been more and more aware. Now, what's a circular economy for us? What do we mean with that? It's circular economy. It's about value preservation. It's about keeping materials in the loop as long as possible. Let me show you this little hills we have. We call them value hills. And if you look on your left, imagine that when we make a product, it's combining energy, materials, and creativity, and it's creating a product with value. It's like rolling up a ball upon a hill. What typically happens at the end of the life, this value rolls down the hill and is lost forever. Look at the plastic soup, for instance, even worse. You have a negative environmental impact. But what if we were to retain this value as high as possible on this hill, by keeping it in the loop, by sharing, by products as a service? And if something is broken, we repair it. If we cannot repair it, we refurbish it or we remanufacture it. And the last thing in the circular economy is actually recycling, strangely enough. Because, for instance, your mobile phone, if you recycle it, you bring it back to material value, which is maybe for a mobile phone 3 to 4 euros. But if you refurbish it, maybe you're talking about 200 euros. So circular economy is a system change, another way of designing, producing, using, and dealing with waste. And it asks for new collaboration down the value chain, which you can see with all these arrows on the right hill. New combinations between different stakeholders, because you have to do it together. And it's of course not only about keeping resources in the loop as possible, it's also about renewable energy, respect for biodiversity, and social inclusiveness. Now, in my country, actually my country is a crazy country because it shouldn't be able to exist. We live in a very vulnerable delta, and it's already since the Middle Ages that we had to work together to keep our feet dry. It makes it collaborative, and that made us innovative. Densely populated, early industrialized, we really had to work to keep our country a livable place. And we have been working on waste management probably for over 150 years. Today we landfill less than 2%. But it's since 2016 that we have fully, let's say, embraced circular economy as a strategy. We want to be fully circular in 2050, and in 10 years from now, yes, 10 years only, we want to have, let's say, reduced by 50% the use of non-renewable raw materials. So this is really a moonshot. It's crazy. And actually speaking, I don't think we will get there, but I think we will get close. And it's really inspirational, and it gives a direction to people. Now, of course, just a moonshot is not enough. You need to focus, just like Europe has done, on a number of priority sectors, because if you focus, let's say, stakeholders can follow. And for us, we have the 80-20 rule. We have selected 5 sectors where we think we can make most momentum. So biomass and food, plastics, manufacturing, construction, and consumer goods. At the same time, just having a focus area and a moonshot is not enough. You have to tweak the system. So it's about interventions. It's a system change. So you have to work on legislation and regulation, because the old rules are for the linear economy, and that's blocking new circular business models. It's about the carrot and the sticks, about pricing incentives, for instance. It's access to financing, because sometimes the total cost of ownership are better, but the upfront costs are higher for circular startups. It's about new accents for knowledge and innovation. For instance, chemical recycling or circular windmills is a topic of much research nowadays in the Netherlands. It's about behavior change, about how you and me, how we recycle, how we buy, if we buy things, or let's say it's a product as a service, we use it temporarily. And it's about international collaboration. And well, actually, that's us, because Holland Circular Hotspot is there to reach out to the international level. It makes no sense to make a perfect circular island of the Netherlands if, let's say, the rest of the world goes down the drain, because we need you. We are so much connected. We're such an open economy. So we need to make the whole world circular if we want to have a future. So we share best practices from businesses. We share the insights, the tools, and the facts and figures from our knowledge institutes. And also we share the hard-learned lessons of our government, how to set up producer responsibility, how to work on green deals, how to stimulate design, etc., etc. Now, we learned that circular economy is actually in transition, and the Dutch way is learning by doing, let's say, building the new and phasing out the old. If you look at this little graph on your left, you will see that if you do nothing, you will lose out. Think about the Volkswagen emission scandal, the China's baby milk scandal. We have to make better use of raw materials to start with, work on waste. But if you stop there, you will see that all kinds of platform models will come on the market and take your place. So you have to move to new economic models. And then if you shift to the picture on the upper right, you see that at the same time, you have to build down the old system, which you don't want, and allow time for that, like phasing out coal-fired power plants, for instance, and stimulate then the new, what you build up. Then if you look to the lower right picture, you see that you start with a small team and transition team that becomes a transition coalition. You start to initiate projects, and then little by little, all these projects become new networks of change, which initiate new products. That's let's say, the road we are on right now. Now, what we learned, it's extremely important to include businesses, because in the end, they are important for scaling up. They invest, they take risk, they accelerate. And if you look at the guy in the upper right, that's the former CEO of the Dutch company DSM. And he said something really nice. He said, how can you claim to be successful as a company in a society that fails? And he's right, because this is about future markets. If society fails, there is no market. So you have to be a force for good for the future as a company. And it makes sense, because if you think of it, if you work on platform models, you can increase your revenue. The market becomes bigger, and if you give something a second or third or fourth life, then you get more value from the materials. And if you work together in a value chain, it's about communication, about sharing risk and more resilience. And of course, less water, less waste, less energy is less cost. So it makes very much business sense. Now, just something, because I have 4 slides about what can be done already today, and I could talk for each slide at least for 1 hour, but I want to show you that from the beginning to the value chain to the end, you can do things today. You can do it in developed countries, in developing countries, and it's working. For instance, in plastics, we know that, let's say, only 40% is recycled, that 1/3 ends up in the ocean and 40% is landfill. But you can do lots of things, actually. You can make bio-based plastics, for instance. You can think about design lessons, which you change the packaging for the future, that they're better recyclable or reusable. You can think about recycling. But what you have to realize is that for something to be recyclable, it needs to be collected, it needs to be sorted, it needs to be recycled, and it needs to be actually applied. So that means value chain collaboration is crucial, and you have to make also qualities that actually the industry needs. Only then you get the pull factor. For instance, QCP makes 99.8% pure polypropylene, which can be used even in baby strollers. Now that's the kind of circles you want to have, basically. I'll give you one other example. In agro-food, agro-food is probably 1/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions. By going circular, you can prevent almost 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And also there, it's about, let's say, all kinds of value chain options. Reducing food waste, 1/3 of all food waste is lost, as you know. It's about cascading of organic residues everywhere in the chain. It's about digesting and composting. But it's also about new diets. For instance, if you look at the picture with the insect, the black soldier flies, you can actually grow black soldier flies on organic waste, harvest the flies, and take the proteins, which can be used as fish feed. Picture next to the vegetarian butcher is zooming in on a growing market for, let's say, meat replacements, which is growing probably 8% a year. On the picture on the lower left is the spillage factory, as we call it. Food which cannot be sold in the supermarket is still perfectly, let's say, right for sauces, pastas, etc. So you can give it a second life again. But it's also about, let's say, high-end values. So making textiles from, let's say, organic waste, or making aromats from organic waste. So I could continue with other examples, but the same in the built environment sector, from the beginning to the value chain to the end. There are lots of circular business models, buildings as a service, sharing, reusing, maintaining, repairing, and in the end, recycling, which can close the loop for buildings everywhere. The same is also in textiles and apparel. So I just want to say, as a closing words, closing the loop for many materials and products is happening today. Lots of companies are, let's say, embracing it. It's happening everywhere, in Ghana, in Vietnam, in India, in the Netherlands. And it's really about circular economy. It's about future markets and continuity. But to scale this up, we need to collaborate. Nobody can do it alone. Government cannot do it alone. Business cannot do it alone. We need everybody on board. And we need to share also in the value chains internationally. So we reach out to the rest of the world, to India. We love to work with you and explore further. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Freek. It's always so cheering hearing from you. You feel you make it possible. Captain Mohan Ram, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Can you put up the slides, please? Can we start with slides? I am speaking from the perspective of automotive industry mainly and manufacturing in India. Next slide, please. I talk about short-term and long-term impact of how the pandemic has affected us, how it has impacted the supply chain, what are the new business models which might emerge, the beneficial role of circular economy and resource efficiency. And I'll stress on recycling of VLVs, which is a low-hanging fruit, great benefits. What are the actions needed? I'll end up with recommendations and conclusions. Next slide, please. You see, the industry has adopted very quickly to the challenges. Sanitization efforts across the entire value chain is excellent. What you call checking people's temperature, then cleaning the machines, social distancing, everything, and less touch points. Industry adopted very, very fast. And it is heartening that the employees are also very conscious of this, and this is being deployed to their homes also by TVS. We have made layout changes, increasing the distances, less touch points, more automation. We have, because of the sudden stoppage of industry and breaking out supply chain, we had to cut, many companies had to cut capital and revenue expenditures. Utility usage came down a lot. There is an acceleration of digitization. Working from home for many of the departments has started and is becoming quite accepted by the people. Most of the meetings are virtual. Inevitably, due to the slowdown, there have been some layoffs and manpower rationalization. Hopefully, this should ameliorate in the days to come. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide. Now, what are the long-term effect? Definitely, designs are being changed. We are looking at opportunities of savings through circular economy, using of secondary material. Resource efficiency has become very much part of the cost control. Work from home will get stabilized. Travel will be reduced. Lean manufacturing techniques are being widely deployed. One positive fallout is the temporary labor who didn't have proper accommodation, proper safety nets, etc. I think terms will improve for them because both the employers and the employees will realize that this kind of disruption which took place is not viable anymore. So I think some kind of housing, support systems, safety nets will come in. Most of the meetings with vendors, dealers, and customers are becoming virtual. Digitization is getting widely spread. A lot of training is taking place. There are a lot of concerns about data security and safety that is being attended to. It requires a total radical change in systems and ethos on the part of the companies. And I think by and large, the companies are responding. Next slide, please. There have been some risks. There is a danger of phishing, data theft, cyber attacks. Our network is not yet very robust. Sometimes halfway through the meetings, people's voices are lost, pictures are lost, etc. There will be some job losses due to automation, especially unskilled jobs. Some cost increase in the short term is inevitable. What is most worrying are the next 2 points, which are soft issues. The lack of personal interaction and camaraderie can lead to some loss of creativity due to human interactions. And looking at a screen is not the same thing as looking at a person, flesh and blood opposite. This needs to be tackled by constant communication with employees and involving families. McKinsey has done a wonderful job in this. They are talking to the families of their employees and trying to get a kind of a involvement here. This is one of the challenges we'll have to address. It's very easy to talk to a computer screen, but it's not the same thing as a man in flesh and blood opposite you. Next slide, please. New business models are emerging. More and more virtual showrooms. You can see a vehicle. You can even literally drive a vehicle almost. The point of sale personnel will reduce. This kind of personal selling will reduce, will be more by data. Monitoring of vehicles in service will increase. Already there is a shift to hybrid electric vehicles and battery electric vehicles. This will accelerate. I want to draw attention to an interesting new paradigm Tesla has brought in. You see, conventionally, the automobile industry brings new models once in 2-3 years. They have new physical features and they attract the customers. They make the first customers of the older vehicles feel that they've got something inferior. This is how the vehicles are sold. Tesla doesn't do that. Tesla offers free online upgrades of software of in-service vehicles so that the vehicle, 4-year-old Tesla, as far as the innards are concerned, is as good as a new vehicle. There's less focus on model changes. And inevitably, with the battery electric vehicles, where the wear and tear is less due to less heat, vibration, etc., the revenue from spares and service will go down. My son has a Chevy Bolt. He had only, in the last 3 years, only rotated the tires and changed the windscreen wiper fluid. There's no maintenance at all. Tesla has gone on to chargers, charging stations, home electronics. They're sort of widening their offer. I also see warranties getting extended. The next slide, please. The supply chain, due to geopolitical factors and also the disruption, Indian companies are depending less and less on China imports. Far more emphasis on localization, passed to the Atmanirbhar initiative. Some amount of vendor rationalization consolidation is taking place, and they're going to vendors closer home. There's more cooperation between vendor and the OEM because we realize that we swim and sink together. Most of the virtual interactions are virtual. And there are cost pressures on all across the chain, and CERE initiatives are coming in place. There's greater use of secondary material. Next slide, please. In product design, there is focus on circular economy and resource efficiency. The tremendous drive towards waste elimination. Most companies have got full-time conservancy officers. They're looking at energy conservation. And work from home has reduced consumption utilities considerably. Focus on recyclability is coming in. And this is being deployed across the supply chain. I'll move on to my hobby horse, something I've been working for 20 years. Recycling of end-of-life vehicles. It's an immediate initiative which India can adopt as a major win-win. I agree with an earlier speaker, Bhavik, that we need systems thinking, not just recycling, the whole system of getting the material back into the system. I look at this pandemic as a motivator and a change agent. Adversity is sometimes the best teacher. Next slide, please. Now, automobiles are the easiest things in the world to recycle. Whereas the dead body navigates itself to the ghat, a car can be driven to the recycling agency. In Europe and Japan, over 95% by weight of vehicles are recovered as material and energy. It does not happen in US and Canada because they can throw 20% in landfills. India has no spare land, as was made out by the minister earlier today. We have 2.5% of the world's land and 20% of the world's population. So this option of throwing in landfill is not available. So we have to go to the post-edit treatment, which is followed in Japan, and European Union start thinking about it now. Recycling conserves steel, aluminum, copper, plastic, rubber, etc. for reuse, upcycling, and recycling. We import 8 to 9 million tons of shredded steel every year. We import aluminum ingots. We import copper. And all this initiative will save energy, save foreign exchange, and reduce pollution. And the most important thing is recycling units give employment opportunities to semi-skilled labor. You don't need PhDs, you don't need computer science, MCS to dismantle a vehicle. It is, and in India, we'll adopt manual methods and go less for automation. And the largest potential for resource efficiency and circular efficiency in India in recycling. And the investments are modest. The payoffs are high. Next slide, please. Now, what to do? You see, for 15 years, my voice was a voice in the wilderness. Suddenly, recycling has become fashionable. Everybody is issuing guidelines, everybody is writing articles, but we need concerted action. Excellent guidelines which have been published Ministry of Road Transport and Highways should be promulgated. They're still in draft form. There is a draft standard of 129 which deals with the entire gamut of reuse, recycle, and recover, heavy metal reduction, information for recycling, and the operation of recycling units. This has to be promulgated. The rules have to be amended. Guidelines are not enough. Guidelines are like the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are very good, but people are still sinning. So you need some rules. You need some regulation. You need some enforcement. There is a talk about scrap incentives. Government of India is looking at it. It can help in the short run to get rid of older stock. Now, there is a serious issue of recycling informal units which are operating in urban areas and polluting. Now, I have suggested the setting up of recycling parks away from residential areas, something in the line of industrial estates, which have been a big success in India. We can relocate the smaller units and ask them to operate from there, give them technical and financial assistance. The nascent industry requires tax and duty support for the first 5 years or so. The very important point, if a corporate invests in recycling, that expense should be accounted as corporate social responsibility expense by the Companies Act, because the benefits of setting up a recycling unit far outweigh any other thing can do. It's like it's unimaginable. So this has got to get into the accepted CSR expenditure. And as mentioned by an earlier speaker, we have to have system thinking. We just start this business and don't look at post-shredder treatment. In 4 to 5 years' time, we'll have huge masses of auto residue, which is potentially toxic. So we need to start work on post-treatment systems to minimize landfills. We should go to the 95-97% recovery of the weight of an automobile, which has been achieved. Next slide, please. Slide, please. This is my last slide. I believe recycling of end-of-life vehicles, which can be combined with so many other consumer durables like refrigerators, washing machines, etc., domestic appliances, has a very high potential for circular economy in India. It is not rocket science. It's not high tech. The investment is relatively low. And except for the land, which is probably the costliest item, most of the equipment made in India, it is a low-hanging fruit, begging to be taken. There'll be huge savings in material, energy, forex, creation of jobs. We need to firm up guidelines, promulgate standards and rules to stimulate investment and regulate industry. Now, when do we do it? We should have done it yesterday. Time to act is now. Every year we are adding more and more vehicles to the stock in the country. It's like a village where there are midwives, but there are no undertakers. This system is not viable. So my recommendation is promulgate the rules, start acting now, and 2 to 3 years' time, start working on post-shredder treatment. And I can assure you, the investment will be recouped 10 times over. And don't start the industry permanently on a handout on a subsidy basis. No business can survive subsidies, for instance. Recycling can be viable. if it is done sensibly. So the time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain Mohan Ram, for that very, very concise and sort of encapsulation of the recycling, the importance of recycling. I would like to quickly ask all the speakers some questions, and may I request the person who is answering to please switch on the video at that time. I will ask some questions that we've been getting from the audience. If you could please answer very quickly, then we'll be able to cover all speakers, and that's really important since the viewpoints coming in are so varied and different. This one is for Professor Bakshi. Should we integrate forest and human activities or separate out human activities from nature and allow nature to grow in her own way, maintaining her own biodiversity? Professor Bakshi?
Yeah, that's a challenging question. I think the answer is all of the above. I mean, human-dominated land areas are what we have now. So we do need to bring more nature, I think, into the human systems, urban systems, industrial systems, and so on. But at the same time, we do need to make sure that nature does have room to sustain itself. And there are studies that indicate that 30% of the global landmass should be left to nature. So I think we need both. That's the short answer.
All right. Geto, there's a question for you. How hard or easy was it to have the Green Deal accepted in the EU? Was there resistance to its proposal at all?
Yeah, of course there was some resistance, but we also have to keep in mind that it's work in progress, and definitely, of course, there are different competition of interest in anything that is related to circular economy. That needs to be taken on board. When we look at the plastics recycling, for example, there is a lot of interest from the oil industry, also, especially in the challenging time post-COVID, to still invest in this type of sector. But on the EU side, of course, this needs to be taken on board. But there is strong political will to address that and to take that on board. And I think this is the only way. You need a gathering of willingness from the businesses, from the political, and from the consumers, the citizens. This is essential for having this type of ambitious strategy being put in place.
Thank you. We have a question from somebody at the Indian Institute of Management at Lucknow asking a question which I would request Fred to answer. If the logic of the circular economy is so compelling, why aren't more companies doing it already? Fred?
Well, I think if I look in the Netherlands, it took us a long time to, let's say, to work to it. We started working 150 years ago on waste management, first out of hygiene, environment reasons. Then we moved to, let's say, system change, resource efficiency measures, and now we're really a systematic change. Let's say, the environmental impact we are having today is not price, so there is not enough incentive basically to change the linear system. But I think especially after COVID-19, become aware that we have to do things quite differently. And in all countries, you see that the low-hanging fruit is being picked up by, let's say, rag pickers, the informal sector. But in order to achieve more results, you have to work good together. And that's about collaboration, and that's not always that easy. But I challenge you, if you look in your own value chain, it's for every company easy to improve, let's say, between 3 and 5% on your resources. But if you are studying in your own back garden, you realize that you can do a lot more looking in your supply chain with, let's say, your supplier and your customer. Then maybe you can even do 10, 15%. And the more you dive deeper in your ecosystem, your value chain, you see more and more opportunities. And that's what the Dutch do, learning by doing. And it's going down a road. And every time we see more opportunities, and first movers have the biggest opportunity. So that's a little bit our journey, I would say.
Thank you. Professor Bakshi, what's the importance of understanding material science? Do we always run up against maybe thermodynamic or similar considerations with materials like plastics or metals which cannot be recycled infinitely?
So, I mean, material science obviously is very important, in the innovation side of things. In terms of running into thermodynamic limits and things like that. So, if we look at nature, which is sort of the inspiration for a lot of the work that we are talking about, nature is able to recycle and be extremely efficient, not at the level of an individual species, but at the level of the entire system. And the reason nature is able to do that is because there is a constant supply of energy that it is depending on. So if we have a constant supply of energy, which for nature is sunlight, then we could, in theory, recycle everything. There are, no limits in that situation. So we need to figure out how we can utilize those types of resources in the manner that can help in meeting human needs and learning from nature beyond getting the inspiration that we have currently for the circular.
Thank you. Thank you, speakers. It's been an absolutely wonderful session with so many inputs on circular economy in practice, in policy, in the future, and in specific segments of industry. The lesson, it seems to be, as we pick up the economic pieces after COVID, integrate resilience into recovery. If indeed we adopt a new set of values, I think the test bed for it will probably be climate change action. After all, it's the crisis from which there is no escape possible with a mask. No country can self-isolate or socially distance from climate change. We at the Center of Excellence are ready to handhold and help the private sector and any other stakeholders in concrete ways to begin the transition to circularity. Thank you so very much for your time, your energy, and all your thoughts. Thank you to the attendees also for being here today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.